Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Monday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, Amanda Head. My co-host and Just the News editor-in-chief, John Solomon, is out on assignment tonight. But as always, I'm reporting to you from our Washington, D.C. and the wiredtofishcoffee.com studios. It is our official coffee over here at Just the News, so head over to wiredtofishcoffee.com and get a 10% discount on all of their great coffee and paraphernalia by using the code JustNews at checkout. All right, the Senate GOP is racing to get that one big, beautiful bill passed before President Trump's July 4th deadline, and we could see a vote as early as tonight to get the whole thing through. If that happens, we of course will let you know, but we are getting all sorts of reaction over here in the nation's capital about it, and we're going to bring those to you throughout the show tonight. And one of them is from Senate Majority Leader John Thune, and he tried to cut through all of the noise explaining what really is the big, beautiful bill. Here it is.
What we are doing here is extending tax relief for the American people, keeping their rates low, making sure they don't have their child tax credit cut in half, their standard deduction cut in half, including new provisions that provide more relief for working Americans, which is what President Trump campaigned on. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, lower taxes for seniors, for Social Security recipients. These are all targeted at working Americans, working families. That is first and foremost about what this is about. This, Mr. President, will make this country safer, stronger, and more prosperous.
So, like I said, we're going to have much more reaction tonight, including from the United States Chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, Steven Meyer, in just a few minutes. But first, I want to touch on just a couple other headlines that you might have missed today. So, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt addressed the administration's unhappiness with Fed Chair Jerome Powell and his refusal to lower rates, citing uncertainty around tariffs, even though the stock market hit record highs today and inflation is way down. So here she is from earlier, listing all of the countries that have lowered their rates so far.
If you look at this chart, this is a chart of all of the interest rates of many countries throughout the world. At the top is Switzerland. They're only paying a quarter for interest rates. Cambodia, Japan, Denmark, Thailand, Botswana, Barbados, Taiwan, Bulgaria, Cuba, Sweden, Morocco, Cabo Verde, South Korea, Algeria, Canada, Albania, Libya, Malaysia, China, New Zealand, Trinidad and Tobago, Czechia, Bolivia, Australia, Costa Rica, the Bahamas, Kuwait, Papua New Guinea, Bosnia, United Kingdom, and the UAE are all paying lower interest rates than the United States of America, which has one of the hottest and strongest economies in the world. The president sent this note to the Fed chair. It says, Jerome, you are as usual too late. You have cost the USA a fortune and continue to do so. You should lower the rate by a lot.
Producer Rob, after the show, can you remind me to switch all of my credit card balances to a Swiss credit card? Holy smokes. And also, how about this? U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr., weighed in on Dr. Anthony Fauci in an interview with Tucker Carlson that was posted today. And what he said is making major waves around Washington, especially when he said this about the reason behind Fauci's pardon from former President Joe Biden.
He got immunity. Why did he need immunity? Why did he need a pardon in advance?
What do you think the answer is?
I would be speculating, but I think he was vulnerable. I think he had a lot of liability on creating coronavirus. He was funding precisely that research at the Wuhan lab.
Well, and we here at Just the News and also over on my podcast, Furthermore with Amanda Head, we have been doing a lot of reporting on the actual origin of COVID-19. So stay tuned for more info on that as it breaks through. But it's time now to get to the one big beautiful bill, or as we call it, OB3. So joining us now, one of our favorite folks over on Capitol Hill. She is Iowa Congresswoman Marionette Miller Meeks. Congresswoman, thank you so much for being here.
I'm delighted to be with you.
All right, OB3 over there in the Senate. I just saw, I think the vote was 55 to 40 something that they voted down the piece in there that kicked off illegals from Medicaid. I am absolutely floored. I didn't think this would even be a question.
You and I are both floored. This was one of the key provisions we put in the House. which there was broad consensus among the conference, among Republicans, and quite honestly, there's broad consensus among the public that illegal immigrants should not be on Medicaid. And we know that there were states that were abusing this, even though they're not supposed to be on Medicaid. They're using workarounds. In addition to which, these are supposedly people who are coming into our country to seek jobs and to work. And we know that part of employment is medical insurance. Also, this is the expansion population. So that means the federal government is paying 90% of the tab and the states are only paying 10% of it. So there is an incentive for states to add individuals. This is one of the things that we're very careful about in Iowa. And I think it is a provision that we're going to work to try to see what other amendments are there where we can get this placed back in. As you know, in the Byrd rule, it came out in the Byrd bath, but it is something that we need to address. And we need to make sure that illegal immigrants are not receiving Medicaid.
Well, if I know anything, it's that folks like you are going to try to find a way to get it back in there. So thank you for that. I want to ask you about Democrat Senator Chris Murphy. He was fear-mongering about this bill. He said it is the most deeply immoral piece of legislation he's ever voted on. What is he talking about?
Well, what's immoral are people like Senator Murphy and other Democrats who are doing fear-mongering over this bill to scare the American people. Let me tell you, the economic consequences of not reauthorizing Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is significant. It is significant. The CBO scored economic growth at 1.8%. We know that pro-growth policies such as those in Tax Cut and Jobs Act or the OB3 are significant, and the economy will grow at a greater pace than that, which will help to reduce both deficit and debt. We know that ordinary average people working are going to benefit. Number one, they're going to benefit by lower tax rates. So if we don't reauthorize, then tax rates go back up. And that's for the lowest income person, all the way up middle income people. They will be paying more in taxes. Their child care tax credit will be cut in half. The standard deduction will be cut in half. And 91% of people file using the standard deduction. In a state like Iowa, where you have multiple small businesses and you have farmers, which are small businesses, the small business provisions in there are significant. So when you're looking at 199A provisions, when you're looking at estate tax for farmers and small businesses to pass on their business or farm to the next generation, that's within this bill. And then we haven't even gotten to no tax on overtime, no tax on tips. We're reducing the taxation burden to those working Americans and those working families, and also to seniors who are working by reducing the amount of tax would be owed on earnings. So those are significant provisions within this bill. And as I said, the economic consequences of not reauthorizing this are going to be significant.
Yeah, and I want to ask you, speaking of those tax provisions, I hear other fear-mongering that, this is going to hurt American workers, but there are tax provisions in there, pro-growth tax incentives, that will ultimately bring factories back from China and other places back here to the United States, which will hire American workers, would it not?
Absolutely. And remember, I said this when we had the Energy and Commerce markup hearing, and that is, I didn't hear the Democrats wail about the 11,000 jobs lost overnight on January 20th of 2021 when Biden came into office after inauguration and canceled the Keystone Pipeline.
Right.
These were union workers. These were people who had mortgages, who had kids in school, who had loan car payments, and their jobs were lost overnight with no provisions, no warning. The Democrats didn't say anything when the Affordable Care Act was passed, and the lies that were told. And the Washington Post said that they gave 4 Pinocchios to President Obama for the lies that were told about the Affordable Care Act. One, premiums would go down by $2,500. They went up that same year. They have continued to go up ever since. If you like your health plan, you can keep your health plan. You're not going to lose your coverage. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Well, number one, millions of people lost health insurance overnight, and what they replaced it with was a more costly plan with higher deductibles. And they also lost their doctor. I know because I was one of those doctors who had patients who had to tell me that if they wanted to come see me, they would pay out of pocket, or they would not be able to come see me because their insurance plan would not cover it. So the 4 Pinocchios from the Washington Post about all of the lies, and the Democrats didn't say anything about all of those people who lost coverage because of the plans they put in place, the lack of association plans, the small business provisions that penalized small businesses and treated large businesses much greater. So if there's any wailing, it should be wailing over what they did to begin with, why they put us in this position where premiums are so high, and we've covered people, but they still can't access healthcare coverage, and also the problems they had to the economy. And as I said, the impact on the economy is profound if we do not reauthorize this. Just think, the Biden economy was so bad. How bad would the Biden economy really have been if Tax Cuts and Jobs Act were not already law at the time?
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. I mean, it probably would have been devastating and would have sent half of the people who were already suffering into bankruptcy. Speaking of that, though, I want to, I look at that, or I try to see it from the Democrats' perspective. First of all, if this doesn't pass and the tax cuts expire, when would Americans feel that? Would that be when they file next April?
Actually, they would begin to feel it toward the end of the year, because remember, the IRS will reconfigure all of those tax rates. So all those tax rates. So if you're in the lowest income tax bracket, your tax rate will go up. And so that means that in, at the end of the year in January, your withholding from your paycheck will already be less because taxes will be greater. So people will feel this as soon as January of 2025. It won't be until they file taxes April 15th. They will feel it immediately in January because all those tax rates will be reconfigured.
Yeah, 2026. So I look at this from a Democrat's perspective, and to me, it seems like that's their greatest incentive to block this from happening. And the poor American people who would end up paying $10,000 more, they're just collateral damage.
Yeah, just like they were when they canceled the Keystone Pipeline, which Biden did, just like they were when they passed the Affordable Care Act and people lost health care coverage, they lost their doctors, and their premiums all went up, and the cost of health care went up. So, I would say the compassionate thing to do would be for the Democrats to get on board, to make sure no illegal aliens are covered on Medicaid, to make sure if you're ineligible for Medicaid, you are not getting Medicaid and taking up the position and funds that should be going to a child or someone with disabilities or a senior who is on a fixed income and can't afford their Medicare copayments, the dual eligibles. They would want to make sure that people have access to the care that they talk about, and also that their taxes do not go up, because their taxes will absolutely go up. And make sure you can pass your family farm on to the next generation. Children don't want to go into farming or agriculture or be a small business owner if they know they can't acquire it and they have to sell the business or sell the farm in order to pay the taxes on it.
Yeah, Congresswoman, we've only got about a minute left, but I wanted to ask you, because Dan Driscoll, the Secretary of the Army, came to Iowa, and you as an Army veteran, I know that meant a lot, but tell us about his trip there today.
Oh, well, let me tell you, I was just so excited, as you said, as an Army veteran, who is someone who has been to the Rock Island Arsenal a great deal, and it's a wonderful facility. It does munitions, does repairs, does parts and servicing, and they also work with the throughout the country, National Guard and reservist and training components. So it was delightful to have him here, to welcome him to Iowa and to Rock Island Arsenal. He gets it. It's amazing how fast he's thinking through things. He had a great reception there. And I will tell you, everybody there, from the Lieutenant General on down, is willing and ready to work with Secretary of the Army. So they were delighted with his visit. And I think he was very impressed. So as an Army veteran, it was great to have him come into our state and to our military installation.
And I'm sure that he loves the state of Iowa, just like everyone else who visits there. So, Iowa Congresswoman Marionette Miller Meeks, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Coming up, more on OB3 with the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, Steven Meyer. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Just the News, No Noise. We are continuing our look at President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill tonight, and let me get some reaction from the left. Here's Democrat Senator Chris Murphy. Let's just say he's not a fan.
No, this sucks. I mean, we're debating a bill that's going to cut health care for 16 million people. It's going to give a tax break to, massively wealthy people who don't need any more money. There are going to be kids who go hungry because of this bill. This is the biggest reduction in, nutrition benefits for kids in the history of the country. I mean, this is the most deeply immoral piece of legislation that I have ever voted on in my entire time in Congress.
It sucks. How eloquent. Well, joining us now to discuss why Senator Murphy is so mad about this from right outside the White House. He serves as the chair on the Council of Economic Advisors, Steven Meyer. And Steven, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. All right, what are you hearing from the upper chamber? Because last I heard they had voted to block the provision that removes illegals from Medicaid, and it obviously passed that procedural vote over the weekend. But what are you hearing as far as a final vote tonight? Are they getting any closer?
So look, I think that we will see a final vote, and I'm optimistic that the Senate will do the right thing because, with respect to Senator Murphy, voting against this bill is voting for the biggest tax hike in history on American families and American firms. It'll drive the economy into a recession with a $4 trillion tax hike, cause millions of people to lose their jobs, many millions of people to lose their health insurance. And so I think that nobody should vote against this bill, Senator Murphy included, but especially Republicans with better conscience for stewarding the economy.
Yeah, and I was just talking to Congresswoman Marionette Miller Meeks. It seems to me that Democrats' greatest incentive to block this is so that frankly, that it hurts Americans. It's collateral damage because if these tax cuts expire, that's what will happen.
That's what'll happen if we have to deal with the biggest tax hike in history, a $4 trillion tax hike on American families and American companies. Investment will come to a halt, hiring will come to a halt, people will be laid off. It'll be a bad outcome. So that's why it's so important to get this bill over the line and make sure the economy replicates what President Trump accomplished in his first term, which was an economic boom with no inflation. What this bill does is creates very powerful incentives for investment. There's things called full expensing, which are very strong tax incentives for investing. And these apply to new manufacturing facilities, new factories. They apply to new equipment. They apply to R&D expenditures. And these create very, very strong incentives for building all of those things, for building new factories, for reshoring industry, for bringing manufacturing back to America. That creates more jobs, it creates more income, it creates more tax revenue. And the folks who, seem to be concerned about the deficit, they don't include those things, right? But that's not all. There's also no taxes on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. These are very profound incentives for folks to work more among those very sensitive parts of the labor market, and they put more money in people's pockets, in Americans' pockets every week, week in, week out. And on top of that, we've got other economic policies boosting economic growth too. We're cutting red tape through deregulation. We're making it easier for firms to invest and hire in America instead of spending years begging permission from Washington. And we've got energy abundance policies too, bringing down gas prices, making it cheaper to build stuff here. You throw all these things together, you get an economic growth boom, the likes of which we've never seen before. It'll bring an additional $4 trillion of revenue from economic growth alone, much more than paying for what CBO expects the bill to cost.
Right. I want to switch gears just a little bit and shift over to trade deals. We're hearing a lot of officials sounding pretty optimistic about securing an EU trade deal, but also Europe's increased defense spending promises, the UK trade deal. Do you think that these things are evidence that the president's tough negotiating tactics are working?
So I'm really glad you brought up trade because in addition to all those other revenues reducing the deficit, there's an additional $3 trillion of tariff revenue that'll be bringing the deficit down too. And that's very profound, that's very powerful. And all the deficit hawks don't seem to count this stuff, but it'll be important. Now, with respect to your question, I think the president's policies are working exactly as intended. On the campaign trail, the president promised 10 to 20% tariffs on the whole world and 50 to 60% tariffs on China in particular. We're not far from that right now. We've got about 10% of the whole world and 50% on China, and it's bringing in trillions of dollars of revenue over the 10-year window, and countries are lining up to make concessions to keep tariff rates at relatively low levels and to avoid them spiking back up. Now, if countries can't convince the president that they're willing to make those concessions necessary, it could be that tariff rates go back up to where they were on April 2nd for those countries. But it does seem like a lot of countries, do seem to be making the concessions that America needs to see to keep tariff rates low. But at the end of the day, the president will decide those things. We've seen very promising progress from a number of countries. Obviously, the UK deal is already done, but there's promising progress from a number of other countries. And I wouldn't be surprised if we have a flurry of frameworks announced in the next couple of weeks before the July 9th deadline.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I want to stay on tariffs for a moment. You said $3 trillion in revenue. That's absolutely incredible. And yet Jerome Powell doesn't see the value in it. Uncertainty, so he refuses to lower the interest rates. What's behind that?
So I want to emphasize $3 trillion revenue, it being such an incredible deficit reducer, but it's not just the revenue alone. I mean, think about it this way. We're raising tariffs by taxing foreigners to use that revenue to pay for lower taxes on American workers, on American families, right? On American firms, American businesses. That's just such a no-brainer. It's amazing that nobody thought about it till President Trump, but taxing foreigners to lower tax rates on Americans is just such a winning recipe. Now, with respect to the Fed, look, I mean, I don't tell the Fed what to do. They set interest rates, but I do think inflation has been really well controlled lately. If you look at the run rate of the consumer price index since President Trump took office in January, it's been running at a 1.5% annualized rate over the last 4 months since the president took office, right? Like, that's a pretty low rate as these things go. Tariffs have left zero macroeconomically significant evidence of inflation. You can scour the inflation data and there's no evidence of it whatsoever. And every print that comes by, every week of new data continues to show the same thing, that there's not really any economically significant evidence of inflation here from tariffs or anything else. And so I do expect in time that the Fed will come around to the president's point of view. As they have in the past, the president was right in 2018 that there was no inflation, there was no need to hike rates, and the Fed came around to his view. And in 2021, the president was right that inflation was a big problem. And again, the Fed came around to his view and started hiking rates. So I have no doubt that they'll come around to his view eventually on this one too.
Yeah. Well, you may not want to tell the Fed what to do, but I think I'm going to print your wise words in that answer right there and send it over via carrier pigeon and drop it on the Fed and hope that they absorb the wisdom. Before we let you go, I want to ask you about this tech tax from Canada. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney acting really tough, and then apparently that is no more. Did Canada blink?
Canada absolutely blinked, and we have yet more evidence, as if we needed more, that a successful career of 5 decades negotiating hundreds of deals has really made the president the best negotiator in the world for this stuff. He told Canada not to do the digital services tax, which singles out American firms as a piggy bank for foreign governments, and Canada didn't want to. He knew exactly the correct pressure to apply, and Canada folded. And so I think we see once again, the president knows how to apply pressure to protect Americans and to protect American businesses and American workers that rely on those businesses for jobs.
Yeah, you would think that all Americans, including Democrats, would be cheering on those negotiating skills because it benefits everybody here. But alas, Steven Meyer in the chair on the Council of Economic Advisors. Thanks so much for being here tonight, sir.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, coming up after the break, Congressman Andy Biggs, also gubernatorial candidate Andy Biggs. He's going to be with us. We'll be right back. Hello, friends. As we celebrate America's birthday, it's a great time to reflect on the facts. And here's one that really matters. The freedoms that we enjoy today didn't happen by accident. They were built on the foundation of faith, family, hard work, and individual liberty. But those values don't protect themselves. They need people like you and me to stand up for them. And that's why I want to encourage you to join AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. AMAC is working every day to defend the principles that made this country great. And right now, in honor of Independence Day, you can get 5 full years of AMAC membership for just $35. It's an incredible opportunity to stay informed with their magazine, access exclusive discounts, free resources, and most importantly, stand with millions of other Americans who believe in protecting this nation's future. So go to amac.us/justnews right now and join. This July, give America the gift of more patriots standing up for her. Welcome back to Just the News, No Noise. A lot of wins have been stacking up for President Trump as of lately. And late last week, we got a big decision from the Supreme Court that greatly limited judicial overreach, and the big, beautiful bill may get passed by the president's desk, get over there by July 4th, that deadline that President Trump set up. So that would be interesting. So joining us now to talk about all of that, he represents the great state of Arizona and is a candidate for governor there as well, Congressman Andy Biggs. Congressman, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Amanda. Good to be with you.
Good to have you. And, I think back a couple months ago when we were having a very different conversation with you about how Congress could, reorganize, rejigger the inferior courts to prevent these nationwide injunction stays, TROs, basically blocking President Trump. And obviously now we have this decision out of the Supreme Court, which I think goes a long way towards the solution. But should there still be a look at judicial reform by Congress?
Yeah, I think ultimately you're going to have to, because we're going to have to take a good long look at the jurisdictional boundaries that these courts are exceeding. I think this is a great decision, though, and really gets back to respecting both the executive and legislative branches. But I still think that there's some policy that has to be changed. So Article 3, Section 1 says that some of these judges who continue to exceed. By the way, you actually have a judge that said about 7-8 days ago that he didn't care what the Supreme Court ruled. He was going to do what he wanted to do anyway. So you still have a problem out there.
And what should be done to those judges?
They should be removed from office. Let's call it what it is. That's an Article 3, Section 1 problem. That means that they're not acting in good behavior. They're off where they shouldn't be. They're in the as we would say in the desert, they're off the path. And so they probably need to be removed from office.
Yeah, I remember in the Bobby Knight days of throwing chairs that there were people who got bumped off the bench. And I think that's what needs to happen with these folks. They need to get bumped off the bench. I want to ask you about what happened just a little while ago over in the Senate. I believe it was 56 senators voted not to remove illegals from Medicaid. And I just keep thinking to myself, this is absolute bizarro land. But in the top of the show, I spoke to Congresswoman Marionette Miller Meeks, and she said that she feels that the Republican caucus on the House side is going to try to find a way to get that back in there. What do you think is going to happen with that?
Yeah, I think she's right. I know that a lot of us have spoken to the Speaker. Some people have spoken to the White House. That has got to change. That was produced actually as a result of the parliamentarian weighing in on some of these issues. And that parliamentarian, which is a Harry Reid appointment, and we all remember what Harry Reid was like. This is why we're having so much problems with what's coming out of the Senate. And I wish Majority Leader Thune would have given her an opportunity to go find different employment and brought in somebody who was on our team as we're going forward. But in any event, I do believe the House is going to try to get something done on that and several other items that have come forward that the parliamentarian weighed in on that have to be there. Otherwise, the base is going to feel betrayed.
Let's do a little mini episode of Mythbusters, because there's a lot of chicken littling, hair on fire coming from the left. And one of the major things that they say is that with respect to President Trump's tax cuts and making them permanent, that even since their inception during his first term, that it was just tax cuts for the rich. Can you help me dispel that?
Yeah, so basically, because everybody gets a reduction in their income tax rate, and also you have an increase in the individual deduction amount, that means the lowest income people are actually going to benefit proportionally more than the higher income people. So that's the facts of the matter, and that's very different than what you're going to hear from my friends on the left.
Yeah. There is a section in this bill that, none of it is perfect, but there is one section that I do believe gets a little bit closer to perfect than the others, and that is the section that lays out border provisions and heightened security, better funding, increased hiring for Border Patrol agents. You representing Arizona and hopefully someday as governor, that's got to look really good to you.
Absolutely right. I mean, What's happening is Tom Homan has told me they need more beds, they need more facilities. Folks on the border, the ICE chief, they need more resources. And this bill gets those resources to them ASAP. I wish we would have done that portion perhaps 3 months ago, but nonetheless, the sooner we get that out, then the sooner that they can remove all these people. We've got over 50,000 people who've actually had due process that are just waiting removal because we don't have the resources to get them out of the country. And then the other thing this will do is where we still have some porous holes, no fencing, where we have some human trafficking going on, drug trafficking going on. That's going to allow us to shut that down too. And the number one human sex and drug trafficking corridor is in the state of Arizona. So it's really important that we get that up there and get the bill passed so we can get that closed.
Yeah. Congressman, I know for a lot of us, we knew that President Trump would be strong on the border. We knew that it would be a black and white difference between Joe Biden and President Trump. But for a lot of us, I think when we heard that number in May, that there were 0 illegals who were released into this country for the first time in I don't know how long, I think that just really hit home for a lot of Americans, because as good as I knew President Trump was going to be, I mean, getting a big fat goose egg on illegal crossings into this country, that I think exceeded a lot of expectations. Did it for you?
Yes, he's been better than I ever thought he would be. And he was absolutely correct. You knew it, John knew it, I knew it. It was not a necessity of law. It was a necessity of enforcement. And when he came out publicly, strongly said, we're going to enforce the law, all of a sudden, people didn't want to get sent back home. They didn't want to pay $5,000 to $10,000 to the cartels and come and then be immediately detained and then sent home. What a difference when you enforce the law. And yeah, so Amanda, when you say, did it exceed my expectations? Boy, howdy, it sure did.
Boy, howdy, I love that. Sir, Democrats, I don't know how they seem to miss the messaging on this, but they are still fighting against President Trump and his border agenda and his deportations, even though the polling shows increased support for President Trump's border policies, including deportations. Are they just reading different polls? Do they not care? What is it?
Well, I think they have a different agenda. And their agenda always was to it's one of several things. Maybe it was they believed in the Reconquista. Maybe that was what they were believing in. Maybe they believed that there really was a necessity to bring in voters. That they're so wrong on policy now. They're shedding people. People are leaving the Democrat Party in droves. So they think they need new voters, and this is a way to get new voters. They actually have joined hands with the low-wage crowd who like low wages. So there's several reasons why they would do it. But you know what? The American people, a majority of them say, and by the way, I think this is probably a 75-80% issue, they're saying, no, we have to secure our borders, and we want people to be removed who came in here, and we want to be safe, and we know that there are criminals there. We know there are terrorist cells that are there. We want to be safe, and we want our border secure. The Democrats just missed that altogether because they're looking in a different direction entirely.
Yeah. Sir, before I let you go, I want to ask you about your campaign, because you're traveling Arizona, speaking to voters, and I know that Arizona is where your heart lies, so you want to do the best you can for those people. My concern is voter integrity and election integrity in Arizona, because I'm still not confident, and I imagine you still have concerns too.
Yeah, and that is an issue that comes up whenever I speak, and you're right, I'm all over the state. But I will tell you that Maricopa County, which is the place where we had the most issues, we've got a new elections official there, and he and the county supervisors, they're both kind of clashing right now. They're all Republicans, but I believe they're going to work out their differences. And when they do, they're trying to clean up the voter rolls right now. They're trying to make sure that we have integrity in our system. It could have been better. This particular governor, Amanda, vetoed a bill that would have made our elections conform to like what's happening in Florida. Would have made us really super, and we could really trust our elections. But I think we're going to feel comfortable enough. And I try to remind people, Donald Trump won here by 160,000 plus votes, the biggest numerical difference of any battleground state. And he did it in Maricopa County and the rest of the country, counties as well. So I think the bottom line is we're going to be okay. But after that, we're going to have to really make sure we clean it up.
Okay, one more, because I think this could really be a poison pill when it comes to election cheating. President Trump has spoken about this. Steven Miller has talked about this, and it was something that President Trump tried to do in his first term by removing illegals from the census and therefore preventing that representation, electoral votes. And I think MTG, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, just introduced something, or she spoke to President Trump about a bill to do that. Do you anticipate that that could be coming down the pike?
I hope so. I know that I introduced and I also co-sponsored another time the same idea that you should not be apportioning your congressional districts with illegal aliens. You just shouldn't be doing that. And so I hope we get that done, because that will make a difference. By the way, I don't know if I think Arizona maintains, but I think California loses. When we were calculating last time, they would have lost, we thought, between 5 and 6 seats.
That's what I
because
heard
of the
too.
number of illegal aliens that they have there. And then Illinois would have lost some, New York would have lost some more.
And then I think that the states where they were dispersed to were mainly Texas, Florida. I think Indiana ended up getting an extra few or something. It was quite random. But yeah, I mean, bottom line is that if these people are illegals, they should not be getting extra representation via electoral college votes or up on Capitol Hill. Congressman, you are always so wise when it comes to this stuff. You always have such great ideas. Thank you for being here, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you, Amanda.
Absolutely.
Always good to be with you.
Likewise, sir. All right, everybody. Up next, Senator Thom Tillis already voted against advancing the One Big Beautiful Bill, and now he has announced his retirement. So we're going to talk to one of the leading challengers for his Senate seat about all of that next.
Hey folks, if you're a homeowner like me, you need to listen to this. In today's AI and cyber world, scammers are stealing home titles and your equity is their target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on one document, use a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee with your county, and boom, just like that, your home title has been transferred out of your name. And that's when the problems begin, because they start taking out loans using your equity and even sell your property. And you're not even going to find out it's happened until you get a collection or foreclosure notice months later. That's a nightmare, right? So when's the last time you checked on your home title? Well, if you're like me, the answer is never, right? You need to do something about that right now. That's why I've partnered with Home Title Lock, so you can find out today if you're already a victim. Use my promo code JTN at HometitleLock.com, and you'll get a free title history report and a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes that might happen, and if fraud does happen, they'll spend up to $1 million to fix it. That's a good deal. Find out why I trust Home Title Lock. Go to HometitleLock.com and use the promo code JTN. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code JTN.
Welcome back, everybody, to Just the News, No Noise. The Trump administration says that the One Big Beautiful Bill is all about setting the president's America First agenda into motion. But despite that, it has faced some challenges from Republicans in the Senate. One of those Republicans, North Carolina Senator Thom Tillis, voted against advancing the bill over the weekend, and that got President Trump to post this over on his Truth Social account. Numerous people have come forward wanting to run in the primary against Senator Thom Tillis. I will be meeting with them over the coming weeks, looking for someone who will properly represent the great people of North Carolina and, so importantly, the United States of America. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Joining us now is one of those candidates in contention for current Senator Thom Tillis' seat. Retired U.S. Navy JAG officer, he's also a former Special Assistant U.S. Attorney, Don Brown. Don, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Amanda. It's great to be with you, and happy Independence Day week to you and to your family.
Indeed.
It's going to be great.
I know. I wore my watermelon earrings. I'm already getting in the spirit of the cookout and celebrating our great country. First of all, I love when President Trump, this new thing of ending his Truth Social post with "Thank you for your attention to this matter." It's just amazing. Like it is some office memo reminding people not to use the middle bathroom in the ladies' room. It's just incredible. But I want to ask you about this One Big Beautiful Bill. Thom Tillis. You know, at this point, it's not really surprising because he's been what seems to be like a Republican in name only for a while, establishment. He has not supported President Trump on a number of major pieces of legislation. And now he says he's not going to run again. Great, but I would imagine that with primary challengers like you, he probably would have lost anyway.
He would have lost, and I know our campaign was going pretty well, Amanda. I didn't know I was going to run him off out of the race before the 4th of July, but I wish I could take credit for that. I got to give the president credit for that. But look, this guy has been anti-Trump on some of the most important issues, important to North Carolinians. He sponsored legislation in the first Trump administration to protect Robert Mueller, an unconstitutionally appointed prosecutor. He opposed Trump's border law in the first administration. Then he wrote an op-ed opposing the president's proposal for an emergency at the border, and that was published in 2019. Then you come over into the second administration, and he tries to torpedo the nomination of my friend Pete Hegseth, who I've worked with on rules of engagement issues when he was at Fox and even before, and Tillerson promised that he would support any Trump nominee coming out of committee. Pete comes out of committee, and Trump takes an affidavit from his sister-in-law trying to torpedo that nomination. Then Ed Martin, who was going to investigate J6, and Trump, I don't think, wanted to know the truth about J6. So it's been one thing after another. And then you get to this bill. Well, he starts monkeying around with the bill. He wants to put green energy stuff in there, just textbook Obama and Biden, this green energy boondoggle. And the next thing you know, he's got an issue with the fact that some of his colleagues want, Medicaid recipients to actually work. Who would have thunk it? You got to, like the Apostle Paul said, you don't work, you don't eat. And so it's just one crazy thing after another. And finally, the president had enough of it. We had pretty credible evidence that the president was very furious with Senator Tillis back when he tried to torpedo Pete's nomination, and it just came to a boiling point. And I can tell you, Republicans in North Carolina are celebrating this week. It's going to be a great Independence Day week for those of us in North Carolina, because we know that the Rhino Senator is gone, baby. And I'm looking forward to taking his place and to taking on the Democrats also.
Happy 4th of July indeed. All right, so I assume you are also looking forward to taking that call when President Trump says that he's going to be meeting with the primary challengers. What will you say to President Trump to convince him that you're the one that he should endorse?
Well, I'm going to ask the president to look at track record. I was involved in battling the 2020 election still, worked very closely with Sidney Powell, working on 3 teams, actually. I've been involved in defending J6 Patriots, when Tillis said, hey, if you walked in the Capitol, even if you did nothing, walked in and walked out, you should have gone to prison. President Trump has pardoned 2 of my clients. Elliot Bechet, who was the youngest J6 Patriot, all Elliot did was walk in and walk out. And on the morning of March 18th, his dad calls me and says, hey, Don, get this, I've got 12 FBI counterterrorism agents raiding my house. And I threw my suit on and go to the federal courthouse, Columbia, South Carolina. The kid was charged with 5 misdemeanors, Amanda. So I've been a champion for freedom, a champion for the president's policies. Pete Hegseth and I have had a very close working relationship. We worked to help the president, convince the president to pardon former Army Lieutenant Clint Lawrence. And I had 3 other JAG officers working with me, John Meyer and Kevin Mikashek and Dave Bolgiano, but it was a team effort. But I've already been working with the administration off and on for the last 10 years in various capacities, investigated the shoot down of the Extortion 17 helicopter in the Obama administration, where we lost 17 members of SEAL Team 6 and 30 Americans. I wrote the book on that. So I've been a champion of military rights, defending our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marine for proper rules of engagement, try to stop the election steal, have been a battler also in medical freedom. In fact, brought a major litigation against the Savannah River nuclear plant over this dangerous mRNA jabs. That case went to the 4th Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond before Biden backed down. We were able to save those jobs. And so medical freedom is going to be a big deal. I'm looking forward to working with Secretary Kennedy in that regard. So it's a background test. And I would ask the president, just look at the candidate's background. Look at the candidate's track record. And, if you want the most MAGA candidate, you got him. You're looking at him right here. And I'm looking forward to stepping into the seat that was once held by the great Jesse Helms and putting an America First senator loyal to the president in the last 2 years of the administration in that seat.
Sir, we often talk about this 3-headed monster between China, Russia, and Iran, but we forget that it's also a 4-headed monster when you tack on North Korea. And we've had this cancer growing across this country of these nations that are absolutely our adversaries, purchasing land near sensitive sites, near nuclear sites, near military sites, and you are looking to ban that absolute out of North Carolina, right?
The first 7 words of the Constitution are "We, the people of the United States," and that's where it starts. And I heard your Andy Biggs talking earlier about some people think these illegal aliens deserve due process. You don't get due process unless you're an American citizen or a citizen of the United States. And purchasing land near military installations is a very, very dangerous thing. I mean, you saw as an analogy what happened in the war over there in Ukraine, and we got to cut the money to that war. But the Ukrainians launched drones close to Russia's strategic bomber bases. And we can't be having that here. So that land's got to be reclaimed. It's got to be given back to Americans. And I'm going to push very hard for federal legislation to protect American farmers and American landowners. We got to get these communists out of our country in terms of owning land, and especially their sensitive military bases. It's got to come to an end.
Yeah, absolutely. Don Brown, we wish you the best of luck. Come back soon. Keep us posted on your campaign.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Brown for NC.com. Look forward to coming back, and God bless.
Sounds great. All right, everybody, coming up, a new Trump administration report reveals Jewish students at Harvard were spat on and mocked with Nazi salutes. How nice. Well, this is while campus leaders said absolutely nothing. So more on that horrible story coming up next. Welcome back to our final segment tonight. A shocking new report from the Trump administration exposes rampant anti-Semitism at Harvard, where Jewish students were reportedly spat on and taunted with Nazi salutes like Heil Hitler, all while university leaders stayed silent. So joining me now to discuss that, higher education expert, Dr. Isaiah Hankel. Dr. Hankel, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We were just talking about this over the break. We have new examples every week. How is this continuing to happen?
I think there's just media spotlight on it now. This has really been happening for decades. To Jewish students, Christian students, very often white students. And I think the spotlight that the Trump administration is putting on this, both in terms of DEI, anti-Semitism, is very important, because we should not be giving public money to universities for this kind of behavior. For anyone, to be clear, right? You don't hear about Jewish students doing this to other students. So I want to be very clear, because sometimes people bring up, like, well, why are we so focused on this happening to Jewish students? Well, we're focused on it happening to any students. Students have civil liberties. They shouldn't be spat on. They shouldn't be threatened. They shouldn't have the kind of violence that we've seen. Things far worse than this have happened over the last couple of years, including many things right after October 7th. Okay, so nobody should have to go through this, and the university should be sticking up for the criminals, the people that are being aggressive. You can't spit on somebody. If I go spit on somebody in the street, I go to jail for assault or some level of assault. Why can people do this on a campus and be protected by the presidents themselves at MIT, Harvard, Columbia, that will stand up on the stage during the commencement speeches and condone this kind of behavior and call it free speech? It's not free speech. It's violence. It's the incitement of violence, and it needs to stop. And the only way it's going to stop is by Trump continuing to add pressure.
Yeah. I've watched enough 3 a.m. episodes of Cops to know that if I spit on someone, I'm definitely going to jail. There are so many people out there who say, why is the Trump administration so protective? Why are Republicans so protective of Jewish students? It's not Jewish students, it's students. It just so happens that Jewish students are the ones who are being targeted right now, is it not?
I agree. And it puts this in the spotlight front and center if you look at the comparison, right? So like I said earlier, you don't see Jewish students doing this to other students. If they did, if anybody did, any type of students, that would also be wrong. But you see it happening to Jewish students in large quantities. Also other populations. And I think anyone that this happens to, there should be a spotlight on. I mean, for a long time, legacy media has put a spotlight on these incidents of anyone that's not Jewish, anyone that's not Christian, anybody that's not white. And so for it to happen at this large of a scale continuously, we have to put a spotlight on it or it's not going to stop. And we should have put a spotlight on this a long time ago, because as we just said, it's been happening for decades. So I want to be clear. If anybody tries to say like, okay, well, why is it the Jewish population that we're focusing on? Well, do you see the Jewish students doing this to other students? They're not. Do you see Jewish students overstaying their visa like these Iranians that overstayed their student visas and were arrested and deported? No, that doesn't happen. Okay, so it's really easy to get on the side of people that are being violently attacked continuously and who don't do those violent attacks continuously. Okay, so if you're a US citizen and you see this stuff, you need to protect people's rights to not have violence, force against them, to be able to learn and to study. People that follow the law, that have certain values, whether those values are intellectualism, peace, safety, the rights to pursue freedom, happiness, everything that the U.S. was founded on. So that's what I want people to pay attention to. I don't want them to get distracted. I want them to say, what values are we going to support here in the U.S.?
Yeah, absolutely. We've just got about 30 seconds left, Dr. Hankel. Tell everybody where they can find more of your work and your companies.
Overqualified.com would be the best place to go. There's a pipeline of students coming out right now of universities that can't get hired, but it's not just them. It's people over 40, 50, and 60 that did everything right. They can't get hired. They're being replaced very often by cheaper labor, foreign, domestic, and AI. So we help people get hired into jobs so you can leverage those degrees you got, leverage that experience you got, make the U.S. more productive, more successful.
Well, at least those hardworking people are no longer paying for the student loans of people who are not working. At least there's that win. Dr. Isaiah Henkel, higher education expert, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, here's a startling statistic to give you. 60% of Jewish students said that they experienced discrimination, stereotyping, or negative bias on campus. I guess if you read your Bible, then you know that this stuff has happened throughout all of time and probably won't stop, but it's really unfortunate to see it happening right here on U.S. soil. But that's all the time we have.